Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Pre-orders are now available for War of the Spark and Modern Horizons booster boxes. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and it's that time of the week again to go over the results of the major tournaments from the weekend. We had a standard GP at MagicFest Kyoto. We'll be looking at those results. Also, Star City Games Cincinnati held a team trio event, which consisted of standard, modern, and legacy, as well as a classic for each of those formats. We're going to dive into all those top 8s. Without any further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start off with the Grand Prix. Here is your top 8. Gruul Aggro came in first place. Sultai Midrange came in second, 5th, and 6th place. Gruul Midrange came in third place. Jeskai Control came in 4th. Mono Red Aggro 7th, and Rakdos Aggro came in 8th. Let's see some of these deck lists, beginning with the first place Gruul Aggro deck. Okay, here you go. This one's a little bit different than we saw maybe a couple weeks ago. Last time there was a big standard tournament. It has evolved a little bit, but the core is still intact here. You're going to find 4 Rekindling Phoenixes in this build. Even though it is an aggro deck, it isn't afraid to go a little bit bigger at times. You still have your smaller things like 3 Direfleet Daredevils here. There's also 4 Goblin Chain Whirlers to pay attention to. You have your Shocks, your Lava Coils, 2 in the main here for Lightning Strikes. What does Ravnica Allegiance bring us in this deck? A lot of cards actually, beginning with Skargon Hellkite, which is a little bigger but can have haste with Riot. Growth Chamber Guardians are in here. Gruul Spellbreaker, really key card, which I think has been underrated. Collision and Colossus is here. Gruul Guild Gates and Stomping Ground. Out of the sideboard, Domri Chaosbringer makes an appearance as well as Cinder Vines. Okay, second place was Sultai Midrange. Now, we know this deck pretty well at this point. It was the Golgari midrange deck last season. This season it started incorporating a little bit of blue because of one really important creature mostly, which we'll get to in just a second. But there's other good reasons to do this as well. One of which is Hostage Taker. 3 copies in the main of this deck. Very solid card. This particular version of the deck is running 3 Vivian Reeds. That's pretty standard fare at this point. Sometimes they'll run 4 though. I have seen that. Also, a lot of other cards you're very familiar with. Merfolk Branchwalker, Llanowar Elves, Jadelight Ranger, you have Cast Downs in here, so on and so forth. Let's see what we get from Ravnica Allegiance in this build. Incubation Druid is here, and Hydroid Crisis, as well as Breeding Pool. Third place, Gruul Midrange. Okay, so there are some similarities between the Gruul deck we looked at a few moments ago, in some cases, but there's also something very different going on here. This deck is going larger, and you are seeing a lot of dinosaurs, actually. 3 Regisaur Alpha, 2 Threshing Bronzodon, a Ghalta Primal Hunger. That's actually kind of sweet. What comes to us from Ravnica Allegiance here? A lot of cards again. This time, Domri Chaosbringer makes it to the main. Growth Chamber Guardians here. Gruul Spellbreaker again. Collision Colossus again. Rhythm of the Wild. This card had high expectations going into the season. Early on, it didn't perform as well, but now it is starting to find a place. And finally, you have Stomping Ground. Out of the sideboard, another copy of Collision Colossus, Cindervines, and another copy of Rhythm of the Wild. Fourth place was Jeskai Control. So Jeskai Control is interesting. We haven't seen as many of those in the top 8 this season. We've seen a lot of Esper Control, but this is a very old school feeling Jeskai Control deck from last season. In fact, you're not going to see a lot of new cards here. We'll look at what is in here in just a second. But first, let's look at Teferi here of Dominaria, 3 of those. 4 Niv Mizzet Perunes are in here, 4 treasure maps in the main in this particular build, 2 expansion explosions, a Shivan Fire shows up in here, 2 lava coils in the main. When it comes to Ravnica Allegiance, you have Absorb joining this deck as well as Hallowed Fountain. Out of the sideboard, Deputy of Detention. 7th place, Mono Red Aggro. So again, another deck you're pretty familiar with. I mean, this definitely had life in previous metas. Let's look at the cards that we know have carried over. 1 copy of Rekindling Phoenix here. So this deck not afraid to go a little bit bigger, but a lot of small creatures. Fanatical Firebrand, get 2 Lava Runners in here. 4 Goblin Chain Whirlers, of course. 3 Experimental Frenzy in the main, 1 out of the sideboard in this particular build. You got your Shocks, you got your Lightning Strikes. What else is here? 4 copies of Light Up the Stage in the main. 8th place was Rakdos Aggro. So look at this build. It doesn't look a whole lot different from the previous build, right? 3 Risk Factors in the main. Okay, maybe that's a little different. Only 1 Experimental Frenzy in the main, 2 in the sideboard, though. Yeah, even the creature suite looks pretty comparable. So how is this a Rakdos aggro deck as opposed to a Mono Red aggro deck? Well, just because of Rick's Mighty Reveler, if you want to use the Spectacle ability there, you're going to need black mana. Blood Crypt will help you with that. Light Up the Stage is also here. Okay, let's move on to the Star City Games Open, and these are the standard decks that were in that tournament's top 8. Now, remember, this is a team event, so these teams were playing a standard deck, a modern deck, and a legacy deck. It is very possible that some of these decks may have been propped up by a good modern or legacy deck, perhaps, or vice versa as we move forward. So just remember that when we look at the open event today. So what is our top 8 in standard? Mono Red Aggro came in first as well as second. Third place, Lesnia Tokens. Fourth place, Gruul Aggro. Fifth place, Esper Control. Sixth and seventh place, Azorius Aggro. Eighth place, Temur Reclamation. Okay, let's look at a few of these deck lists we haven't looked at yet, starting with the third place, the Lesnia Tokens deck. And another deck that feels like it's a blast from the past, coming out of last season in some ways. But this is a deck that can still put up good results even in this season. Now, you see a lot of cards that you're familiar with from before. 4 History of Benalius, 4 March of the Multitudes, 3 Legion's Landings, 4 Saproling Migrations, 2 Watley Radiant Champions in the main here. You also get Venerated Loxodon, Zemara Soul of the Accords in here, Tristani Discordant. What do we get from the newest set in Standard? Just Tithe Taker, but 4 of them. It is an important card here. Esper Control deck, we're kind of used to seeing this control build this season. 4 Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. There's a lot of cards from the newest set here, though. Here we go. Kaya Orzhov Usurper, 1 copy in the main. Cry of the Carnarium is here in the main. Kaya's Wrath, probably the best reason to go Esper Control over other types at this time. Absorb is in here, Mortify, Godless Shrine, and Hallowed Fountain. Alright, here's that 6th place Azorius aggro deck, and if you're familiar with the mono white or some of those Boros builds from last season, this doesn't look too different to you. But the blue definitely makes a difference. A lot of it comes out of the sideboard, though, if you want to add some control elements to Game 2 or Game 3. Aside from that, though, what do we have here? Adanto Vanguard, still here, 3 of those. 4 Benalish Marshals, of course, they are part of the engine of this deck. 4 Dauntless Bodyguard, 4 Skymarcher Aspirant, 4 History of Benalia, 4 Legion's Landings, a copy of Ajani Adversary of Tyrants in the main, 2 copies in the side. What do we got from Ravnica Allegiance? 3 Tithe Takers this time, and Hallowed Fountain. Out of the sideboard, Deputy of Detention and Unbreakable Formation. Temur Reclamation came in 8th place. There's different types of these decks. Some go a little more creature heavy, some go a little more burn heavy. This is kind of a cross between the two with 2 copies of Nimizet Perun in here. You also have things like Search for Escantus, Sinister Sabotage for a more controlling feel here. But then you have your burn spells too, things like 4 Expansion Explosions. Ravnica Allegiance brings us Growth Spiral, of course, Wilderness Reclamation, Breeding Pool, and Stomping Ground. Out of the sideboard, a copy of Biogenic Ooze. Okay, one more standard top 8, and this is the Star City Games Classic in Cincinnati. Maybe a smaller tournament compared to some of these standard tournaments. However, this one is just standard on its own. First place is Azorius Aggro, that also came in 7th place. Gruul Aggro came in 2nd place. Rakdos Midrange came in 3rd. Temur Reclamation came in 4th and 6th. Naya Angels came in 5th. We'll look at that one in just a second. And finally, Lesnia Tokens came in 8th place. Again, we'll look at a few of the deck lists we haven't looked at yet, beginning with Rakdos Midrange. This one is a little bit different from some of the other decks that we did look at. You can see this is going bigger. 4 Rekindling Phoenixes this time, 3 Siege Gang Commanders, a Karn Sign of Urza even makes it into the main. 3 Treasure Maps are here. And when it comes to cards from Ravnica Allegiance, Rick's Mighty Reveler shows up again, Blood Crypt and Rakdos Guildgate. Alright, Angel fans out there, here's Naya Angels, and this is sweet. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of these putting up big results this season, but I'm glad that this one did. You have 2 copies of Aurelia, Exemplar of Justice, Lyra Dawnbringer, and Shalai Voice of Plenty in here. That's actually really sweet. Some other cards from last season, like 4 Knight of Autumn, show up. You have 2 Lava Coils in the main. What do we get from Ravnica Allegiance? Quite a few cards, actually. Angel of Grace is here, Skargon Hellkite, Growth Chamber Guardian, Gruul Spellbreaker again, Collision Colossus, Rhythm of the Wild shows up here too, and Stomping Ground. Out of the sideboard, another copy of Collision Colossus and Cindervines. Okay, let's move on to Modern. These are the Modern decks that were in the top 8 of that Star City Games Open team event. Coming in first, as well as 8th place, Mono Green Tron. 2nd place is Phoenix. 3rd place, War Prison. 4th, Amulet Titan, that also came in 5th place. 6th place, Dredge. 7th place, Eldrazi Taxes. No cards from Ravnica Allegiance played in these particular deck lists, so we'll move on to the next event. And this is the Star City Games Modern Classic, a little bit smaller of an event compared to some, but it is all modern, beginning with the first and second place is at Phoenix decks, third place is Azorius Control, fourth place Burn, fifth place and seventh place Eldrazi Taxes, sixth place Hardened Scales, eighth place Azorius Spirits. Now a few decks here did have cards from Ravnica Allegiance in them, so let's take a look at those. Beginning with third place Azorius Control. Very familiar deck list if you play Modern, right? 2 copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 Teferis in here. You have 2 Snapcaster Mages, a Click shows up, a lot of control elements, Cryptic Commands, Mana Leak, Negate, so on and so forth. Ravnica Allegiance brings us Absorb for the first time in Modern. There's 1 copy in the main here. Fourth place was Burn, and yeah, when you look at this list, it looks like a Burn deck. 4 Lava Spike, you got 4 Lightning Bolt, 2 Lightning Helix, 2 Skullcrack. What comes to us from the new set, though? 4 copies of Skewer the Critics in the main. Azorius Spirits came in 8th place, again a pretty standard deck list when you look at it. However, notice there's 3 copies of a Ravnica Allegiance card in the main. That's Deputy of Detention. It feels like every week I see more copies of this show up in the Humans and the Spirits deck. It does feel like it's taking hold in those builds. Okay, let's move on to Legacy, beginning with the 3rd chapter of the Star City Games Open. And of course, remember, this is the team event. First place, 4-color Loam. Second place, as well as 6th place, Death and Taxes. Third place is a Delver that also came in 8th place. 4th place, Lands. 5th place, Golgari Depths. 7th place, Miracles. And there are some cards from Ravnica Allegiance in some of these decks. Let's look at those lists. We have 4-color Loam. This came in first place, of course. Now, 4-color Loam is a pretty solid deck. I wouldn't expect to see a lot of changes in here, but there is a card from the new set in the sideboard, and that's 2 copies of Cindervines. Here's the third place is a Delver deck, and yes, we have been seeing cards from the Ravnica Allegiance set in these builds. This one is no exception. If you take a close look at the creatures, you're going to find 3 copies of Terramander in there. Okay, of course, we got a Star City Games Classic Legacy event as well. And here's your top 8. First place is Azorius Stoneblade. Second place is a Delver. Third place, Lands. Fourth place, Eldrazi Post. Fifth place, Grixis Delver. Sixth place, Grixis Control. Seventh place, Sneak and Show. Eighth place, Storm. Let's look at that Is a Delver deck that came in second place. Very similar to the one we just looked at, but a little different. You're going to notice 4 Terramanders in the main this time, and another card from Ravnica Allegiance. 2 Light Up the Stages are joining those Terramanders in the main. Alright, that wraps up our look at tournament results this week. Until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.